Right, good evening, and tonight on Kinship Carers UK, I would like to introduce to you this lovely lady called Pippa.
Hello.
Pippa, hello. Would you like to tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Hi, so my name is Pippa Trueman. I am a therapeutic life story practitioner, and I work independently in the Worcestershire area and also in the Birmingham area, doing therapeutic life story work with children and young people who are in kinship care placements or in foster care or who are adopted.
Brilliant. How long have you been doing that, Pippa?
So I've been independent doing just therapeutic life story work for 2 years now, coming up. So my background is mainly as a social worker, and I've been doing that for a lot longer. So I've been using life story work themes throughout my career, really. So I've been a qualified social worker for nearly 21 years. And I started off in social care, working in residential children's home in Bromsgrove when I was a teenager, straight fresh out of college, like you do. And then went off to Manchester and did a degree and did some more work in children's homes, and then came to train again in Manchester. And very quickly realised that I was very much into basically digging really quite deeply, I think, and not just scratching the surface in terms of understanding what families needed and what made families tick and what made children tick, and had a real keen interest in working directly with families and children very, very early on. So all of my experiences through working with children and families in most of the kind of social work teams, within safeguarding, within looked after children's teams. And then more recently, my experience moved to post-adoption support in Worcestershire. And since 2013, all of my work has been around post-order, if you like. So post-adoption, post-special guardianship order, and really firming up my interest and specialism in using life story work to really help children and families to make sense of what's happened, who am I, how have we come to be where we are today, and kind of that's how I've moved more into doing that full time now. So I focus purely on therapeutic life story work and other bits and bobs, because I can't just do one thing at a time. I like to do other things. So I also am involved in some of the projects, looking mainly working with young people who are care experienced and how we can support them as adults. So,
Brilliant.
Yeah,
that's
answer,
brilliant.
I think, Enza.
How did you sort of, what qualifications did you get? Because I know you moved into therapeutic life stories. So what qualifications did you need, or what extra training did you need to do that?
Yeah, so to be a therapeutic life story work practitioner, we come in all shapes and sizes. So to do the Richard Rose model, which is the model that most therapeutic life story work practitioners use in this country, you can do the diploma in therapeutic life story work, or you can do an extended certificate. So after years of doing various bits and bobs of life story work and life story books and life story training generally, I decided to do the diploma. And some people on the course are qualified social workers, some are teachers, some are foster carers, some are parents, some are, you know, it's a whole variety of people who have an interest and a passion for life story work and who are able to use that in a therapeutic way. So I did the training in 2018 and 2019 with Richard Rose. At the time it was down in London. It's now online mainly, but it's all across the country now. It's changed and it's more accessible now than it was before. So yeah, so I did the diploma, but as I say, there's various ways of doing it, and there's lots of people from different backgrounds and different therapeutic backgrounds as well who are using it in all kinds of different areas.
So what's the difference between life story and therapeutic life story work?
Okay,
So
so therapeutic life story work, in the way that I use it, is it's a 3-stage model that if I was commissioned to do a piece of therapeutic life story work with a young person or an adult, it would usually be a piece of work that would take around 12 months. It's a longer term piece of work, and it is trauma informed, it is attachment focused, it's looking at building a sense of safety with a young person and with their carer first. And the first stage is around basically what I always thought I was really good at: digging, gathering all of the different stories and narratives and information, files, memories, other people's stories of the person, of the young person, and pulling all that information together into what we call an information bank. So drawing it all down and making sure that we're gathering this information for young people so that it's all together. Because quite often, as I'm sure you'll all know, or you'll have had some experience of, you might have quite a lot of information, or you might not have very much information about a child's history, or they might be in various different places, often in lots of reports, or a bit in one report, or a bit in this book there, or somebody else's, my memories of this, or this photo album there. So that first part of the process is around really pulling that together and putting together a kind of chronology, a timeline of what happened, and not just what happened to the child, but also what happened before. So who are the family, who are the main people, and we tend to go back as far as grandparents, that level. Who are they and what are their stories, and how do their stories make sense in terms of what we know about birth parents, and how do the birth parent stories make sense in terms of the child's history. So we go right back to before the child was born, so that when we come to do the direct work, which is the next part, we've got all the information. So when children are ready to start on that journey and start to look at their life story, hopefully all of that information, or certainly there are lots of different versions of the same events, or different narratives and different bits of information that then we draw on and help them through using wallpaper to go in a it's not necessarily chronological, but you do it therapeutic in the sense of you start with and at the beginning of their story, and you help them to make sense of that all the way through, and you bring that up to the present day, and look at all of their. So it's about integrating often what are fragments of children's lives, gathering up and helping them to put all these pieces and their memories together in a sense that they can make sense of those narratives. They can form their own view as to what they believe, what they think, what they know, what they remember, and you put it all together. And the third part of that therapeutic life story work model is that then you write it into a book that reflects the work that they've done. So it isn't a life story book as we know it, it's a book that will reflect the work that they've done. So it's theirs, it's their workings out, if you like. It's the way that they form what they think and what they believe, and how they feel about things. And their wishes for the future. And so that's therapeutic life story work. It's a big piece of work. Not all young people, not all children need that. Not all people, they don't all want that. I think with life story work, the life story work is what you're all doing day in, day out, all of the time. It's the conversations about all kinds of things that children will pop out with, or it's just the day-to-day, who am I stuff, what we did on your birthday last year, where are the photos of me when I was born, who do I look like, where do I get my curly hair from, when am I seeing my dad next, or why don't I see grandma anymore, or all of those things. It can be all of those kind of what you'd imagine life story questions to be, or it can be the, well, where do babies come from? what do children need when you're feeding children, making sure that they're having a healthy, balanced diet, when you're trying to fill all the gaps often that children will have come to you with. Those are the bits of life story work that you're doing all the time. And maybe not realizing that is what you're doing. So to me, life story work is having your hat on and knowing enough about life story to be able to really be confident in doing that in a way that you know that you're helping your child, your young person, to make sense of these things as they go along all of the time. Because life story work, hopefully, it shouldn't be something that we sit down and do with children. It should be something that we just drip all the time, and that we feel confident enough to know how to do that.
That was going to be my question. Who should do it? That's fine. That's fine. I was going to say, who should do it, and
yeah,
and who can do it? I mean,
yeah, and I think historically it's been seen as a social worker's job, and I think often it is seen as that. And I think there are elements within, particularly within adoption, it's different because it is legally, children who are adopted have to have a life story book. They have to have a later life letter, and they at the point of the adoption, or just after the adoption order. And I think because of that, but there isn't that legislation for other children and young people, certainly not for young people who are in local authority care, and not for kin. So you'll get a variety. Some local authorities are very good at doing life story books for children who are in kinship care placements and on special guardianship orders. Others aren't, and I'm sure there's a mix across all of you today. It'd be interesting to hear a little bit about that. But I think it is there are responsibilities in terms of social workers being able to do that work, and they do a lot of life story work, but as we know, it isn't possible to do that for everybody. And it doesn't have to be somebody who's professionally trained. I would say, lots of people do life story work all of the time. Family support workers, you're all doing it all the time, as I say. Foster carers are often doing a lot of life story work with children. And it's the bits, the collecting memories, gathering things, all of that stuff. It's knowing that this is life story work that you're doing a lot of the time. So yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the therapeutic life story work, that is different. That needs to be, it's a longer standing piece of work, and it's often dealing with those young people and children who really need that additional support with that. It could be where they've had some life story work, or they've got a basic and age appropriate understanding, but they're really struggling, or they're really stuck, or there are certain elements of trauma within their background that they really need some additional therapeutic support around to help move that on, and to understand, what is it about what happened to me that means that this is happening to, this is how I feel about it now, and that I can't look to the future. Or sometimes it can be very complex cases where, where a lot can have happened. Some young people experience multiple moves and continue to move and continue to not feel secure and stable where they are. So it can be really helpful to do that there. So I'd say therapeutic life story work would need to be done by a therapeutic life story work practitioner. But in terms of life story work, that can be done by, and it is done generally by those people who've got a relationship with the child. The children best. You're in a best place to be able to help them to feel safe and secure and to ask those questions. And if they understand that they can do, and that these conversations are open, they're on the table, and whatever it is that you're struggling with or we need to help you with, this is what we're here for. This is part of my role with you. Part of our parenting role is to make sure that you understand who you are and where you came from and what happened. And we're here to help you with all of what goes with that, which is often really tricky stuff. But that's the stuff you're dealing with anyway.
Yeah. How important is it to to have life story work completed correctly? I mean, is there an incorrect way of doing life story work? Can we cause more trauma, or is it better to do, you know, how do we start, and what is, yeah, there's a lot of questions there. So how important is it to have life story work completed correctly?
I think the aim is that you would hope that you wouldn't really need, in an ideal world, we wouldn't really need to sit down and do this work with young people, that we should hope that we can give them enough in a drip, drip, drip from being little, if we're lucky enough for them to live with us when they're little, that we can drip this drip these conversations in a way that they learn it, so that it's not something that they've been told. Or I think there is no right way always, and these conversations are often extremely difficult. But I think in the back of my mind, when you were saying that, Enza, I always think people often say, but what if we open up the can of worms and then we don't know what to do with it? And I think in my experience, and certainly from families that I work with, you know, those cans of worms are there for children. And quite often it's you that they want to sit with and start to open that can of worms. And I think, you know, if you feel that is, once you start to have these conversations, that is something that you feel they're going to need additional support with, and I think that would be something then that you could ask for additional support with. But I think you know, you can't really get it wrong. We need children, young people to know, actually, you can say anything to me. Nothing is, you know, nothing is off limits. You can ask anything at all. You want to create an environment where they feel that they can ask those questions and they can start to make sense of things and talk to you about it. But sometimes that might not be, it might not be you, it might be somebody else that they want to talk to. Some young people like to talk to lots of people sometimes, so they might tell lots of people their story, which also may not be appropriate. So it may be that you're trying to think about ways of trying to help them to make sense of it in a way that's a bit safer. But I would say there's no right or wrong. You know your children, and don't be frightened to have the conversations. And as I say, if you feel that there are things that you're not sure about, then ask for support. Ask for additional help around those topics.
If we have a child that's been through a tremendous amount of trauma,
yeah,
and something's happened to them that we don't feel comfortable telling them about, is it best to ask for help? And how do we go about asking for it, and who do we ask? Because most of the people here are either kinship foster carers or SGO holders, so you're only talking about us as SGOs and kinship foster carers.
Okay. So again, when these conversations are happening at the point that, do you mean when things have happened before they come to live with you?
Yeah. The reason they're removed is obviously a variety of reasons. So some of them might be a bit too traumatic to talk about for both the adult and the child.
Yeah.
Even looking back, it's difficult to tell a child who's been abused or severely neglected or harmed that these people have done this to you. And you know, we know without going into detail, there are big things that can happen to these small children.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, you know, if you've got cases like that, how do we seek that help? Because we don't feel comfortable saying it to them.
Yeah, and I think like as you say, you know, in an ideal world, these are conversations that you would be having very early stages and should be having very early stages. I think some courts are getting better at having these conversations before orders are made. Certainly in terms of support that's available to you, I think you need to be really clear as to what am I going to need to be able to meet the child's needs lifelong, because these are conversations that you are going to need to have with them. And even if you don't tell them yourself and you do that through a therapeutic process, or somebody else can tell them, it's you who needs to emotionally support the children. So you would need to have an access to help around thinking around these really tricky conversations with kids, really difficult conversations to have with children. And I think when they're young, it's, you know, I think there's ways of doing that are really quite straightforward, but also we don't want to sanitize things. So I think historically and probably now, I think because we don't know what to say, we tend to either not tell young people information, or we might give them a kind of blanket, well, something quite general that doesn't really explain what's happened. So I think it's around you being confident and knowing how to explain things in a way that are age appropriate, that is enough for them, and knowing when they need a little bit more and how to do that in a way that's appropriate to their needs. And I think if you're not sure, and if you really don't feel comfortable, then I would like to, I'd like to think that you should go back to whoever your local authority is and ask for specific advice and support around that specific area. I've brought along and I'm going to put together a book list of a whole load of stuff where you can look at it. I would say though, if you're really not confident and you really don't know, and sometimes, you know, it's a big ask to ask you, or for you to, it can feel very overwhelming and frightening to not know how to say certain things. And there are ways that we need to learn to talk to our children about really difficult things and to feel confident to do so. And, you know, there's some very good training around, certainly within foster carers, or they're, you know, I'm sure it's available, or to be thinking about how we can make sure that you've got access to good training to have these conversations and to feel confident in being able to support your young people as they grow older. Because what you might say when they're little will change when they're a little bit older, or when it might not be about age, it might be about development or stage, or what they understand and also what they're asking, or what they've heard. Because often particularly in kinship arrangements, and is that they may well still be in contact with other people who may be able to give them information that you know, that, or tell them stories or different versions of the same events that then you're dealing with as well, or that they might find out. And what we don't want is for children to feel that their story can't be told, or that it's so awful that, you know, my auntie can't even tell me, because or that they then would make up, because we know with children, if they don't know the stories and they don't know what's happened, then they fill the gaps, don't they, often? Yeah. Or they might worry about, well, oh, if it's that bad that I don't even know, or they can't even tell me, then what has happened to me? So it's really important that we are able to find ways of talking to them about these things that have happened, and we can do that in a way that builds up, you know, and in a way that feels comfortable. But again, as I say, depending on what it is, you know, there should be specific professional advice around for very specific, difficult conversations to have, and how to do that. You don't really want to go Googling, you know, I'm not suggesting for a minute that anybody goes Googling it, but there is a lot of information around for on the internet around having difficult conversations with children, around how to broach certain subjects, and to have those conversations. And as we know, they come home and ask you all kinds of obscure things that you never thought you'd need to be explaining, that you then have to think, oh, okay, right, I think maybe we need to move into this zone, and actually they're ready for a little bit more than I thought they were.
Thank you. You mentioned if we can't access a professional, because obviously some local authorities haven't got post-order support for SGOs, can you point us into the right direction of websites, books, material that we can use to do life story or start life story work?
So one of the so historically, life story books were written, and they were written, the book started at the beginning and they finished it whenever they came to live with their the family that they live with now. And we realised that particularly in adoption, this left children really confused, because actually often the family that they live with now is the only family that they know and the only family that they can make any sense of. So Joy Rees is quite a good place to start. She developed an attachment model of writing life story books in a very simple, accessible way. And she's got a free website with loads of information. And she's written a lovely book, which I will put on my list, called, I don't think you can see that.
No, it's because you've got your background on.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Life story books for adopted and fostered children, but she does include kinship care in there too. And it's got some lovely examples of how to write simple narratives for children. But I think it's important to say that the first bit is around who am I? It's the me, myself, and I, all about me. Who am I? Me. So in terms of children making sense of their identity, they need to really be firmly grounded with their secure base, if you like. So with their attachment figure. So that's with you. So you start all life story work, if you like, in the here and now. What colour are my eyes? Who do I look like? What's my hair like? Who are my sisters and brothers? And who's in my family? And what does my room look like? And all that kind of stuff. And then from there, from that safe base, and then really understanding a sense of who am I? Where do I live? Me being here. Then you go back to the beginning in the middle. So you sandwich the middle bit. So in the beginning, this happened. I was born to, and you can talk about that, and talk around what happened within their birth family and some of the reasons why there were worries and what those worries were and who had those worries and who made decisions around why they came to live with you and why they went to live in foster care or with somebody else, and then how they came to live with you. And then you sandwich after that, you come back to the present day and you help them to think about where am I at school, who are my friends, all the things I like to do outside of school, and then you think about your future together as a family. And a lot of that is built on, she's got a beautiful memory book which you can download for free with lots of kind of worksheets and the me, myself and I stuff. But it's also really nice for being able to update it and for children, young people to keep doing those, to look at how am I growing? How many birthdays have I had here? Put together all those. This was you on your 4th birthday, your 5th birthday. Oh, look, do you remember what we did on your 6th birthday? Next year, when you're going to be 7, we're going to do this. So that's kind of building it into a nice kind of way of doing it that you can then keep going and keep as a record for children. So I would say she's a good place to start. It's very easy to read. It's very user-friendly. It's not very expensive. But she gives lots and lots of very good examples as to how to word things and how to do some of that work with children. There's Richard Rose's book, which is based on the model. The way that the model works is that within the direct work, you use lots of different interventions, which are very activity-based, very visual. You write on the wallpaper. There's lots of different ideas in there in terms of ways of supporting children to understand some of the trickier things and to explain and help them to express their feelings and their thoughts around their history and around what they're learning about themselves and what they think. There's absolutely tons of stuff. Yeah. Things like really basic stuff, like it seems basic, but it isn't. Where do babies come from? That is, in terms of life story, there are some fantastic books. You have to be a bit careful, but I've found a lovely one recently. I don't know if you've come across The Usborne.
That's it, leave it there. That's it. Yeah. Where do babies come from?
Where do babies come from? But it's not just humans. So you've got tadpoles, butterflies, birds, penguins, but it's beautifully done in that it does explain how babies are made and how babies grow and what babies need. but in terms of lots of different animals, and it's very interactive. Now, some of the books you might think, well, that's fine for little ones, but what do we do with teenagers? And in my experience, I would say often we're going right back to the basics, and they love the very basics. They love, there's lots you can do around, asking questions, and I've used these with children as old as 12, 13 sometimes, because we can't assume that they do necessarily know, or that they know that in the context of their own history. They might think they know that information, but actually when you go back and you think about it with them, has anybody explained that to them? Do they really understand where babies come from and how they were made, and what does that mean? What do we know about, what do they understand about relationships, and getting, how that all works? And also it's helpful in terms of thinking about often sibling relationships. Does everybody have the same mum and dad in our family? How does that work? Families look like all kinds of different things. And that's going to be different for every child, every family, every different eventuality. And that'll look different, and how they make sense of that will depend on lots of different factors and what they understand about family life. So all of those kind of what might seem like a basic concept are actually really helpful when you're just stripping it back and thinking, oh yeah, how far back do we need to go? There's a beautiful book by Katie Wrench and Leslie Naylor.
That's it. Perfect.
Got it?
Yeah.
Life story work with children who are fostered or adopted. And again, this is entirely relevant to you. It's got a massive coffee stain on it. I do apologise. I use it all the time. Lots of lovely practical activities to do with children around feelings, making mood boards, using collage, drawing around children, relaxation exercises, thinking about how you make family trees come to life for them, using stories to tell different parts of their story, thinking about parenting. What does that mean? What do children need? How do we help children to understand what they need, what all children need? And that's really key in life story work, because that then lays the foundations for helping them to make sense of why people were worried about the care that they were receiving, and why they couldn't remain in the situation that they were in, or why people made decisions about that. So often thinking with children about what needs are is really helpful. I use, for those of you who have done, I don't know how much you get in terms of preparation training or training on attachment, but often if you've done training on attachment, you'll have looked at the attachment wall, I would imagine.
Maybe.
Yeah, you might be familiar with the wall, which is all of the things that children need. And it's how if each brick represents different needs of the child, and how if those things aren't there, or they move out, or they're wobbled, the wall can become really unstable. And actually we need children to have really firm, stable walls with all of the bricks in lines for them to grow and to develop into stable and secure adults. And that can be hard to do then when you become a parent, if you haven't had your own wall. And often it's helping children to make sense of what that looks like for them, and why it was. So there's lots of stuff in here to do with the needs of children, whose jobs, all the jobs that parents have to do in order to keep children safe and happy and well, and in learning and growing, and how that changes, so that we can really help them get a sense of, so what did that mean for me? Because I think sometimes the explanations that children have are very general, and sometimes we need to really be quite specific and let them know what happened. If care wasn't very good, or things were not very safe, then we might need to be quite explicit about what that was, so that they can understand it or remember it in the way that they do remember it, and then that's okay for them to talk about it.
Brilliant.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and thank you for putting together that little toolbox of lists for us. We will be able to share it later. So in the practical here and now, do you suggest making a little memory box or a big memory box of things that they've done, or things that we've gathered from the past, or our memory box is a good idea?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, I think in terms of, and encouraging young people to really treasure things, or to know that you really treasure those bits for them, and that you're going to help them keep them safe, or that you have treasured them. I don't know how many of you have got enormous memory boxes or huge collections of photographs of things that you've done, or just keeping records for children. But I think often the children that I work with and that we're thinking about, they will have very large gaps in their lives often, or there'll be parts of their lives where we don't have those bits for them, we don't have that. And if we can collect them, if we can gather those, then that's fantastic. But also it's helping them to understand that we really value them, and keeping that together and helping them to really have a sense of, again, as I say, that continuation, really picking up those fragments and keeping them all together, and really valuing this is important. This is all part of your life. And of course you might not be that interested in it now that you're however old you are, and you're not that bothered, but I am, and I'm going to make sure that you've got this. And I'm really keen to make sure that you've got all of these memories, so that when you look back, and when they look back, they know where all the parts of their life are. I think for children who haven't had moves, who have grown up within their birth families, and they haven't had to think about this, they don't really have to question it. And I think for you as carers of these children, I think it's really important that for them, that we are thinking about this for them, because it isn't necessarily something that has been done. Bits of their lives might not have been considered. So I think, or that you just might not have. But if you know that those are gaps, or that that you can help them to understand that, but also help them to gather up the bits and make sure that you've got those. So things like anything, if you do have things from when they were born, or like the wristband, or the button, all the things that people keep for children generally, for the photos, the first day of school, the tooth falling out, the gappy photos, all those milestones, how old was I when I walked, all of that kind of stuff, the red book. Keeping all of that stuff safe and treasuring it, and helping them to learn to do that too. Yeah, I would say I think they're brilliant. But I've got three. I didn't say about my own children. I've got three birth children, and every single birthday we have to get the box out, and we have to go through the birth story. And every time I just think about they know where it is, and it's so important. And I think if we know that this is important for our children, and we can do that with them and for them, then do it as much as you can, because they really need you to do it with them.
Lovely. Thank you, Pippa. Thank you so much for your time and for your in-depth, lovely life story work. It's been great speaking to you, and we look forward to seeing your list.
Oh yes, I will send you I'll put together a resource list, really, a book list, and some brilliant websites so you can have a look.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.